when things are just cranking up. We saw a bunch of rulings before any of those jurors were brought into the room to go through those 42 questions. What was established by the judge in those rulings before the jurors came in?
One of the very interesting things about those rulings, Lawrence, was, of course, Trump has spent the lead up to this trial trying to discredit Judge Merchan and has been saying how unfair he is, how compromised he is. And what the judge did was created very provisional rulings that in many instances were favorable to Trump. He ruled that Trump, at least at this stage, prosecutors cannot mention one of the facts that you mentioned in your opening, that he had conducted this affair while his wife was pregnant. The prosecutors cannot mention also that with the affair with Karen McDougal, that took place before the pregnancy with Stormy Daniels. It was after the pregnancy. In another ruling, Justice Merchan had said that that prosecutors cannot show the tape from the Access Hollywood tape that precipitated the campaign being in a tailspin, but the prosecutors can describe it. These were very detailed rulings. The judge is very clear to observe the due process rights of the accused and also giving the prosecutors a lot of runway to expand on their broader theory of the case, which is that this was an effort to influence the 2016 election, showing that this isn't only about one payment, that this was about an effort with the release of the Access Hollywood tape to put out a bunch of scandals. And he really threaded that line carefully and in detailed form.
Just to go to one of these rulings that the judge made at the pretrial stage to show how tentative they actually are. This is the ruling he made about not mentioning, the prosecution should not mention that Melania Trump was pregnant while the Karen McDougal affair was going on, for example. And so the judge says, at this moment, I think that the prejudicial value of that definitely exceeds any probative value. As you know, we never know how evidence will come in, what will happen on cross-examination, and whether any doors will be open. But for purposes of why we're here today, at this moment, I don't believe that that is necessary. And Andrew, that seemed to be the note on many of these evidentiary rulings, that at this moment, we don't anticipate allowing that. But then he makes the point that, hey, on cross-examination, who knows, things can happen.
Yeah, that's very standard in these sort of what are called in limine pretrial motions, where a judge will say what both sides can do and what they cannot do for the moment. But then, depending on what arguments and what evidence each side decides to bring out, they can, as Adam said, open the door to evidence that was previously held to be unduly prejudicial. It can become relevant because it's unfair for one side to then make an argument that could be responded to by the other side, but for that pretrial ruling. So, for instance, if, they were to say, well, the transcript of the tape where the tape itself is not being allowed to be played, if for some reason the defense were to make some argument that the transcript's inaccurate or it doesn't reflect what Donald Trump actually said on the tape, that would open the door. I don't suspect that the defense lawyers here who are very experienced will do that, will open the door to it. But it's really typical to have these kind of preliminary rulings to set the ground rules for both sides.
Andrew, now that we have the transcripts, I guess we've had our hands on this transcript for over an hour or so of literally every word said in the courtroom today. Is there anything in that transcript, now that we actually know every word said in the courtroom, that jumps out at you?
Well, I think Adam's point that the judge is being fair has made rulings that were favorable to one side or the other, depending on what particular facts are. That struck me as a very good sign. I think he is no nonsense. For instance, the government made the argument that they still have not received discovery from the defense. The defense has to produce any documents that they intend to use in the case to defend themselves. And if they don't do that, they should be precluded. And what the judge did is said, you know what, you have 24 hours to produce that. No more games. If you do not produce every piece of evidence that you intend to use, it's precluded. So I thought that was a very strong, definitive ruling by the judge. So I think he is going to run a very tight ship. He strikes me as somebody in the mold of Judge Kaplan, the judge who had the two E. Jean Carroll cases. So I think we're going to see a very efficient trial being conducted here.
Adam, I've been in courtrooms where every minute of the day where when I finally see the transcript, I notice something that I didn't notice in the room because it moves at different speeds and sometimes you don't hear every word. Was there anything in that transcript after you got to review it where it kind of underlined or added to your understanding of what you were hearing?
Well, I would say the proximity of those Parker warnings that you showed viewers a little bit earlier. Now, as you noted, these are warnings that the judge must give. Yeah. And in most instances, when the defendant is not the former president of the United States, would be quite mundane.
Yeah.
But it's quite extraordinary in this instance. And two things struck to me when I was reading it in the transcript. One, it was around the time that Trump reportedly fell asleep. Yeah. This is toward the end of the morning session. This is a time when most reporters were observing him nodding off. It's a striking thing to see the proximity between that moment and a former president of the United States being read these extraordinary things, a warning that he could be tried in absentia if he is disruptive, and that he could, warning about bail jumping, that this followed it's both extraordinary and totally mundane. And that was what jumped out at me from a close read of the transcript.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. In any other case, I would not have bothered to read the Parker warning, standard issue. I just wouldn't have bothered. But he's saying this to a former president, and all these references to, we will come and arrest you for this, we'll arrest you for that, we'll arrest you for that.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.